7 years ago this month, I bought my first home in Halifax, and I can still remember that day like it was yesterday. I was incredibly excited, but I was also extremely overwhelmed and definitely overambitious, and I really had to scrape the money together to get the funds to make it happen in the first place. Now, this house was a two-story property that needed a ton of work, which I definitely underestimated, but at the end of the renovation, the property did end up turning out great. I've since sold this property to use the money for other business ventures, but it will always be my first home, and I lived there for 3 years during a time in my life that there was a lot of excitement going on as my business in real estate was growing. Looking back now, this home purchase in particular was probably the best financial decision I have ever made, and it really set things in motion to set me up for where I am today. But it definitely came with some bumps along the road, and I learned a lot of lessons along the way. So today I'm going to share 7 of these lessons with you. Now, just before I get into it, if you're new here, my name is Andrew Stephens, and I've been a realtor in Halifax for 10 years. If you want to be educated on the Halifax real estate market, then you're in the right place. So hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. And if you're thinking about making a move in the HRM, you can reach out to me anytime in the Calendly link below. All right, so getting right into it, lesson number 1, owning a home is much more expensive than you think it is. So this is always the case, and it's not just the mortgage payment. A lot of people go on to an online mortgage calculator and they put it in there and they say, well, I can afford the mortgage, so I can afford a home. You really need to take a clear look at your budget and to account for property taxes, insurance, utilities, and maintenance as well. These are things that are often overlooked, but you should be able to see the utility bills and all that kind of stuff when you're purchasing the property so that you can set your budget up and you can know with confidence that you can afford it. In terms of buying a home, especially when it's your first home, I would very highly recommend that you stay away from your max budget, especially if you're a young family or a young professional. You really don't want to be house broke, especially at this point in your life. Not to mention, if you're thinking about starting a family soon and your life is changing, you're likely going to have a lot more expenses coming down the pipeline in the near future. Now, moving on to lesson number 2, speaking of maintenance, lesson number 2 is that there's a lot more maintenance owning a home than you realize. So whatever you're budgeting, increase it. And just know that there's always going to be these things coming up. And now with the price of fixing issues in a house, it adds up to your bank account very, very quickly. So you need to make sure that you're budgeting appropriately for that. Now, some people will use a 1% of the overall market value rule. Some people will use $1 a square foot, or there's all kinds of different ways that you can look this up online. But generally speaking, if you're buying a home for $500,000, you're going to have a few $1,000s of maintenance every year. I'd almost guarantee it, especially if it's an older home. Moving on to lesson number 3. This one is buying a multi-unit property as my first home was probably the best decision I have ever made. Yes, it came with some headaches from time to time. Yes, I would have preferred to have my own place, but by purchasing a multi-unit property and renting out half of it, I had a tenant that was paying a big chunk of my mortgage. Now, this is also known online as house hacking. So because they were paying my mortgage payment, I actually was paying less money to own this home monthly in terms of my monthly expenses coming out of my own personal pocket than I was at my previous 1-bedroom apartment that I lived at before I bought this house. And this is all relative because yes, back in 2017 when I bought this property, the rates were much lower and the price points were much lower, but the market rents were much lower as well. So although expenses have gone up and the rates and the purchase prices have gone up, the rents have also skyrocketed quite a bit in this time frame as well. So it is all relative. Truthfully, house hacking is something that more first-time home buyers should be focusing on and should be thinking about doing. And although it comes with some headaches, it can set you up for something greater in the future. And after living there for 3 years, I moved out of this property and bought another one, but I kept it as a rental property. And then I was into that property for a lot less money than if I bought a detached home first. And then I would need to put 20% down on a 2-unit rental property, as opposed to doing 5% down on the first one and then 5% down on the second home as well. All right, so moving on to lesson number 4. This one is you'll spend a lifetime looking for the perfect home. So in other words, your first home does not have to be your forever home. It's going to be a 4 or 5 year plan, get in, build some equity, and then you could scale up from there if you decide to do so. If you're spending a year or 2 or 3 looking for the perfect home, it's never going to be out there anyway, especially if you're at a general first time home buyer price range. Then you'd be better off getting into the market earlier and building that equity instead of seeing the price points go up over those 3 years and you're the one missing out on all that equity. Again, I talk about it all the time, but all those people that were thinking about moving in 2021 that waited until 2023 ended up paying about $100,000 more for a home than they would have if they bought it in 2021. So that's all equity that could have been in their pocket, not the other way around. At the end of the day, you're better off thinking about what's really important to you in a home and then narrowing down your search and pulling the trigger and getting into a home with a 4 or 5 year plan in mind. And if this happens 12 or 24 months earlier because you weren't as picky, trust me, you're going to thank yourself in the future for that one. Moving on to lesson number 5. This one is take the time to think about your lifestyle and what will really work for you. Now, I know I just said getting in sooner is better, and of course, that's always going to be the case, generally speaking, but it doesn't mean you should rush. You need to be financially ready and you need to be emotionally ready to buy a home. Now, although you're never going to find the perfect home for your first home, it's still important to think about your kind of top 2 or 3 things that are really important to you and then narrow down your search from there. So, for example, location, the amount of work needed, maybe the style of home, things like this are big ticket items that need to be accounted for and that need to be thought about very clearly before pulling the trigger. So think about the big ticket items, what's important to you and what really matters. And while you're taking all this into consideration, just remember your first home doesn't have to be your forever home. I'm going to say it a few times more in this video. Doesn't have to be your forever home. Get into the market, build equity. And if you want to scale up to something bigger or maybe a better neighborhood or something like that for your kind of forever family home, you can do that down the road with some of the equity you've built from this first home purchase. Moving on to lesson number 6. This one is location is more important than the house itself. I talk about this a lot in other videos and with clients, and I can't stress this enough. The location really matters. So you need to think about a couple things here. One is your lifestyle, what'll work for you, what your commutes are like, where you're spending your time, how close are your friends and family, and all kinds of things like that. It's one thing to drive 40 minutes out of town to a house on a beautiful summer day for one single showing when you're really excited about it, than it is to do it every single day, Monday to Friday, in the snow, in the rain, going to work in the city in rush hour. So just keep all these things in mind when you're buying a home. But the second thing you need to think about where it's your first home is that you want to buy something in a good neighborhood that's likely to gain in value over the coming years. And that's going to help you build equity to, again, in theory, if you want to do it 5 years down the road or 6 years or 8 years down the road, you can scale up to a home that is more suited for you and your family as more of a forever type of home. All right, last but certainly not least, number 7. Using a mortgage broker is, in my opinion, the best way to go. They have options of several different lenders depending on your situation. They can also be a little bit more flexible on how they're going to get you approved, again, because they have access to so many different lenders. They can find out what's the best product for you based on your particular situation. And in my opinion, it's just the best way to go. I may take a lot of slack for that one on this channel, but it is what it is. That's my opinion. Use a mortgage broker. It's a better overall fit for you going forward to purchase your first home, as they'll have more flexibility and more products for you to choose from. Buying a home, especially your first one, is one of the biggest decisions you're ever going to make in your life. And it's something that's going to cost you a lot of money and potentially going to be one of your biggest financial investments ever. And it's important to go into it with a clear mind and with a good head on your shoulders of how you're going to approach this situation. So I hope some of these lessons that I learned along the way, some of them the hard way, some of them the good way, but I hope that some of these lessons I've talked about today will help you on your home buying journey. And if you're interested in chatting about buying a home in the HRM or selling one if you're looking to sell and then move up to another home, don't hesitate to reach out to me through my Calendly link below in the description. And if you got any value out of this video, all I ask is that you hit that like button and you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my future content. And that'll help push this out to more people like you who may be interested in being educated about the Halifax and Nova Scotia real estate markets. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your support. If you think I missed anything that's key, drop it in the comments below. I'd love to get some dialogue started down there. Have a great day. Thank you for watching.